Bye, Gordy. All right. Everyone ready?
No.
All right.
John.
All right. We will get started with our county meeting. Today is Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022, 22222. Welcome, everyone. We appreciate you being here, and we welcome those who are watching us on our channel on YouTube. We will go ahead and start. Our opening will be by Councilman Nolan Gunnell. Nolan?
I just want to say a few words to about our military people. Today, our flags are flying at half-staff because of Colonel Halverson, the candy bomber, and the things that happened in World War II. My father served in World War II, was in the Battle of the Bulge, and I have a lot of respect. Also, it might be of interest to know that they have sent 12 F-35 planes from Hill Air Force Base and 350 servicemen over to Germany to watch what's going on in Ukraine. So whoever and whatever you think about freedom, I hope you're giving some thoughts to these men and women, because when we have skirmishes, it is somebody's father, somebody's husband, somebody's mother, somebody's relative. And so I just want us to be cognizant of the price and cost of freedom. There's always somebody defending it, and they've got themselves involved in it. So I hope we all take some time and find that peaceful moment and reflect upon those men and women who have given us that right. And with that, I'd like to make my opening comments in the form of a prayer. Our Father in heaven, we come before Thee at this time. We're grateful for this nation, Father, for the freedom it provides us. We're grateful for those men and women who serve to provide it with us and for us. And we pray that peace may resolve throughout this world, that those leaders may find diplomatic solutions rather than conflict to settle those things. We pray for peace. We pray for cool minds to be here this evening as we discuss these things. We're grateful for this political process and the opportunity to participate in it. And we're grateful for those who serve, and this we give thanks for in this land. And this do so in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Now, if you'd please join me and stand in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Gunnell. Appreciate those words and that thought. Before we move on, I'd like to excuse David Zook and Carl Ward from the meeting here today. All right. Has everyone had a chance to look at and review and look at the agenda, approve the agenda?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay,
I had one question on that. There's two items that I think it's important that the county executive be here for our discussion on. 6C and 11E regarding the contract for the county lobbyist and the discussion on the solid waste. I wonder if we could make a motion to amend that and move those to the next council meeting.
Well, I'd like to have a little bit of discussion on that motion.
Sure.
I see a lot of mayors out there from different cities who've come tonight, and I'm sure would like to know what's going on with this. So I think that it would be a detriment to them if we skipped over that particular item. I'd like to be able to talk with them about that.
Solid waste?
Yeah.
Okay.
what was the other one?
The contract for the county lobbyist.
On that, I don't know what the date is. Supposedly that's being able to be canceled within 30 days of when it's signed. If we move it to March, we might miss that ability.
Why is the executive not here today? You know?
Sick? I called him, he's sick.
I'm prepared to speak to that item.
You ready to?
For me, I've not spoken with David Zook about it.
Okay, well, I'll draw that then.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Has everyone had a chance to review and approve the minutes? And there was an update to the minutes from last time because the signed people that were here at the meeting wasn't added to that, so that's been updated.
I have an amendment I'd like to make, Madam Chair.
Okay.
On item 11B, under discussion of the Cash Resource Center, I'd like to strike the word possible and possible gap in communication. I think it was very clear, and the executive apologized for that lack of communication, so I'd like to strike possible. And also move to strike, trying to see where that other word was. I think there was the word alleged. Alleged lack of council approval. Again, he apologized, and I do think it was of a fact that it lacked council approval. So I'd like to strike possible and alleged on 11B. And would move approval with that amendment.
Okay.
Second.
Second, all right. It's been moved and seconded to make those changes on the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, very good. All right, we'll go past the report of the county executive. Doesn't look like there was too much there anyway. All right, items of special interest. Is Kathleen here?
Kathleen just submitted a letter.
Okay, so it's that letter on the tax cancellation request.
And I looked at that, and it's basically, they're gone.
Yeah.
And so, do we need a motion to basically approve that? Then I would so move that we approve that, the tax cancellation request.
Okay.
I will second.
Okay.
Or whoever else second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the tax cancellation request. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we have a request for extension of RAPS funds from Hiram City. Are Craig and Jamie here?
I'm here.
Okay, you're Jamie, right?
Yes, Craig isn't quite here, and he actually, I just texted him.
Okay, do
Is
you
there a
want?
way we could wait a minute, or?
Yes, we can wait for you. Okay, thank you. We'll come back to that. Remind me, though.
Okay.
I might forget it, okay? All right. Okay, we need to discuss the the countywide solid waste collection. And we have Mayor Holly Danes here to speak to us about that.
Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. And I know Paul has a concern that the executive isn't here, but this is basically just to start a discussion and kind of let everyone know at the same time kind of where we're coming from. So I just have, a brief statement, and then again, this can just begin the discussion. Good evening. As we all know, our county has experienced rapid growth over the last 10 years. During that time, Logan City has continued to expand our environmental department services to meet the growing need. You may not realize it, but currently 71% of our residential collection equipment is for service outside of Logan. As we look at the future and project what Logan would need to do for a successful enterprise fund over the long term, Logan does not control the tools we need to make that happen. For example, future plans would need to include a transfer station in both the north and south ends of the valley. Logan does not control the acquisition of property, permitting, or the construction of facilities outside our city. Logan doesn't independently set collection rates. Our contract with the county allows for either party to terminate with 1 year's notice. There is great risk to Logan if we continue to purchase additional equipment, hire added personnel, build new facilities, and expand our operations, only to have the contract terminated. And we're aware that other cities have had discussions with private waste management companies to see what their options might be. The North Valley Landfill, Transfer Station, and Green Waste Facility will continue to be open to everyone. However, the time has come for Logan to right-size our garbage collection operations so we can efficiently respond to the needs of Logan residents and businesses. This has been a good partnership for many years, but with unprecedented growth, things have gotten out of balance. We acknowledge that we will be giving up the transfer that we currently earn as we shift to only providing garbage collection services for Logan City. However, we believe this sacrifice is necessary for Logan for our long-term stability. Our thought is we will continue to provide collection services for the next 2 years until the end of 2023, if necessary, to allow everyone to develop a smooth transition to alternative collection services according to whatever works best. We are happy to be a resource in any way we can, and will share our expertise and data as you chart a future course forward. I realize change is difficult, but as the old adage goes, the only constant in life is change. And I mean, I have some statistics on the number of households that have increased in the last 10 years with the census data. I have my staff here from the Environmental and Finance Department. If you have any specific questions tonight, again, this is just to begin the discussion, and we're available as a resource. Again, I know the contract has been with the county, so I certainly wanted to come, and we wanted to talk to you first. It may affect cities, and, there are a lot of options out there. I think maybe at the time it started, there just wasn't really the capacity. The county has great capacity now, and we just feel like it's time to start moving in that direction. So with that, if you have some specific questions, we can respond. If not, it's just basically we're opening the discussion about the best way to move forward.
Any questions for Mayor Daines?
I have a question
Oh, okay.
from this letter, and could we all get a copy of that?
Sure, I will email that to Barbara
That'd be
tomorrow morning.
awesome. It sounds to me like Logan's mind is made up. Am I understanding that right? It's like giving us notice that this is what you're doing, there's not room for any negotiation. Am I understanding correctly?
Again, as we thought about this, and we've been contemplating this internally, for several months. And I mean, it would probably need to be like a 20-year contract for us to feel, and some specific guarantees about, things going forward. I'm not sure that's something you would want. I mean, we could have that discussion if there's interest in, a real long term. But again, there are options for the county to take over, and we could be helpful in that if that's the route you'd like to go. There are certainly private services these days. So again, but without some long-term guarantee, again, it puts us at risk going forward. And again, there just doesn't seem to be a path forward to be able to, how do we be responsible for developing, building a transfer station in the north and the south end of the valley? And it also leads to the larger question, should one city be providing this service? I mean, Logan, there is no other city in the entire state that provides service for an entire county in terms of garbage collection service. So, is that a proper role for us to continue to do that, as now the collection service is really 71% outside of Logan City?
So that sounds very reasonable, and that's something that Logan has come to the decision on over the last several months. Then it's been in
That's
process.
correct. Again, we have not, as we've talked internally, how can we, I mean, it has been a challenge to continue to provide service as the growth has expanded, and it really has come to the point where, a change needs to be made, or we need to invest in additional equipment, additional personnel, start thinking about long-term facilities, and it just didn't seem like a wise course of action for us.
Mayor Daines, the question that I just came up in my mind with is, as we have been in this marriage for many, many years, and it seems to have been good for everyone. I think Logan City's provided an excellent garbage collection way of doing things. But as we move forward, we need to also realize the people outside of Logan City, of course, have caused Logan City to have to buy a lot of equipment to go wherever in the county it goes to pick up the garbage. But the budget was always such, and the collection fee was all such that those equipment and those employees were all paid out of the money that was collected. Is it Logan City's opinion that all that equipment, all that stuff is solely owned by Logan City, or does Logan City have the opinion that a percentage of that equipment and personnel was paid for by the money that came from people outside of Logan City? And how do you divide that up? Is that even in thought, or is it Logan's opinion?
Rich, would you like to deal with, I mean, we kind of had this conversation. It's like the
sure
fee
you've
has
had
been
that
for the service. Would you like to add to that?
I'm not sure I have all the answers. Whenever you look at a balance sheet, there are assets and there are also liabilities. And so just looking at what is owned probably wouldn't be fair. There's no contemplation on my side representing the finances that there's any ownership outside of Logan. But there certainly is cooperation and willingness to work with whoever decides to take over in whatever capacity they decide to take over for other entities. But there's no ownership. Certainly that is owned by Logan. The assets and the liabilities. And there are liabilities with landfill closure and all of those types of things, as well as some liabilities associated with personnel and assets.
It's your opinion, and probably Logan City's opinion, that the assets that have been purchased as we're collecting the garbage in Cache County is solely owned by Logan City. And if anyone else, suppose in 2 years, somebody else has got to come up with a way of collecting the garbage to go to the landfill, and that is in such a way that the individual, maybe the county, maybe a private person, is going to have to go out on the market and purchase all that equipment. You know, there's a little bit of rub in my mind that Logan City has every year benefited by taking $1 million in their budget, and that's only fair. I don't have any qualms with that. You've also paid your employees well, everything else, but the ownership of all that kind of stuff almost appears to me that it needs to be shared, even though it probably legally isn't, but theoretically it should, because it's been paid by those people. And the day that you decide you're not going to pick up the garbage anymore, if it goes to that, then huge windfall on the account of Logan City and people in the county. I shouldn't say the county, the cities that are not in Logan City and the people that are in the county suddenly have to pay again for something they've already halfway paid for. I'm almost starting to feel a little bit like maybe you're okay to continue to do it if you can get a long-term agreement. Is that kind of what I'm hearing Mayor Dane say?
The mayor and the elected officials obviously will make those decisions. My position is advisory, but my advice to them would be the kind of restrictions we'd have to impose upon other people, I think, are unfair in order for us to feel secure in what we're doing and engaging in long-term contracts. Therefore, it would be my advice, don't do it. Help, assist, aid, do all the things that we can do to help others stand on their own, but let's not do it. And let's not cherry pick either, those that are closest to the city of Logan, because we could make the best money off of those. I think that would be inappropriate as well. My recommendation is let's take care of the city of Logan. Now, as to your first point, anytime you do a cost of service study, be it for garbage collection, be it for electric service, be it for sewer treatment, whatever it is, you always take into account the cost of capital. Regardless of whether something is paid off or not, that's a financing charge. The cost of capital is always in any study. Now, the reason you want a long-term commitment is so that you can amortize that cost of capital over a number of years. And so I don't see the county or any of these individual cities are in any worse position than they were before. Because the cost of service study that will be done by, let's say, Waste Management, if Waste Management were to come in, would include a cost of capital. So in Logan's case, yes, we have collected fees over time, and yes, we have bought assets, purchased assets. But whether or not those assets are purchased outright or whether they're financed is irrelevant to the cost of service study. So I don't see that you're in any worse position or any better. Now, I do see how some might say, yes, we have helped contribute toward the vitality of Logan City. But again, those assets and those liabilities are all controlled by the City of Logan and assumed by the City of Logan.
So is there a way to get I'm sitting here and I'm new, but I don't have any idea as this splits out, what falls as far as the landfill, the transfer station, where do these all settle out and what becomes what, who's controlling what? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, and Logan built those as part of, again, providing the service over a number of years. And they will continue to be open to the public and will continue to do cost of service studies to determine what the fees should be for whomever comes and brings things to the transfer station or the landfill. So we'll continue to have those open to the public, and we'll be fair with that. Also, if it's something the county is interested in taking over, we will have more equipment than we need. So we could potentially, sell that to an entity that was interested in starting a new business if the county was interested. So those are topics that are on the table. Because again, we would have to continue to invest in new equipment to provide the service and expand our equipment and employees if we were to continue.
Seems in my mind the biggest cost is the landfill or the land. My question goes back kind of along the same course of what Gordon's talking about. What have our county citizens had or have put into that? You're saying it's Logan City's, but it was a joint effort that found that ground and everything else as far as the North Landfill, was it not? And so now we're sitting here saying, okay, Logan's separating off from that, yet it's out in the county. So how do I'm just really confused as to how do we get down to what's best for Logan and for the county and for landfill and for everything else.
Right, and we can continue to discuss that as we go forward. Again, what do you do in the future about a North Valley and a South Valley transfer station, which are needed in the future? Again, we didn't, as we came and tried to get permission to do a compost facility, we weren't successful in moving that forward. So, there are a lot of questions to be answered as we move forward. And again, as partnerships change and dissolve, and, we'll need to work things through. And that, like I say, we just wanted to make sure we gave plenty of time to have those discussions. That's why our target goal is, give it a couple of years. It's not going to be easy. But I know we can sort through that. And again, we'd like, to hear from the county what their interest is going forward. So,
Any other questions?
I just wish there had been more of a consultation so that county, city, mayors, cities, everybody out in the county could, it's like Gene, it's almost like this decision's made. Now we gotta stand back and assemble rather than saying, okay, is there any working ground on this or anything else from that side is where I'm coming from.
yeah.
Well, I kind of think with what Mayor Daines has said is that's what we're supposed to be doing in during the 2-year period, which is probably okay. You haven't addressed my question, and your man didn't want to touch it. Are you more interested in getting a long-term contract? Is that what's scaring you? Because I know there's cities that's talked about and made figures and everything about the landfill and all the things. Can they do it cheaper somewhere else? That's what you've done. Are we still on possibly the same page that we can all work together if we was for sure that we were going to all be together for the next 20 years?
Our preference would be to just serve Logan City. We think that's what is more appropriate at this point, given our growth and given the growth of the county. Again, we can have those conversations and see what those specifics need to be, but our preference is that, and again, we don't want to cherry pick and say we'll just, take the communities that would be most advantageous to us financially, because they're close and they're compact. We think it's probably fair just to say, we serve Logan City, and,
I'm a little concerned in my mind also that we've had a pattern that's starting to develop that Logan City wants to get out of just anything that doesn't really benefit them at the event. It started out years ago with the ice arena, and now it's went down to Sims, and now, there was concern about the fire in there, the fire protection and whatnot. Now we're talking sewage. Now, am I to understand that if that pattern, that we maybe should be talking about the sewer at the same time?
well, we do have a different contract there that protects us, and Logan basically has decision-making capability on that. 30-year agreement. So again, in order to get into that much infrastructure, we did need to have that much security and certainty. And again, it is growing pains. I mean, and for instance, we did separate on Sims. We had almost exactly the same number of calls this past year just for Logan, just what we were managing in Logan City, as that we had the previous year when we were all together in Sims. And again, if you look at the census numbers, I mean, just looking at, the percent change in housing units over the last 10 years, I'll just hit most of them are over in double digits. Clarkston, 13%, Cove, 15%, Hyde Park, 34%, Hiram, 27%, Logan, 11%, Millville, 25%, Nibley, 38%, North Logan, 42%, Petersboro area, which is kind of a census area, 64%, Providence, 11%, Richmond, 15%, River Heights, 18%, Smithfield, 38%, Trenton, 15%, Wellsville, 17%. There is so much more work to be done, and as Isa pointed out, what used to be, one garbage truck going to pick up a smaller city, well, now there are businesses, and there are, things have expanded. There's greenways pickup, there's residential pickup, there's multiple business pickups. It has become a very large operation. And again, to continue to provide the service that we've provided, and I think we've tried to do a pretty good job and been fair with the price, but we're to the point where we need to make significant investments to continue to serve the growing population, and we're just not sure it's really appropriate for us to continue to do that. So again, that's why we're here.
You haven't went broke, you're not losing money,
No, we're giving up money. Again, we have made money. It is an enterprise fund, and we've always been upfront about that, but we're willing to give that up for long-term stability because we think we are putting our city at risk if we continue with the present arrangement.
Councilman Erickson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just hoping that this would have probably came to the Solid Waste Advisory Board in concept, and we could have talked about it there before coming to this forum.
Yeah.
I wish that we'd have done this more incrementally rather than just.
And part of it was, with the Sims, breakup, we did get complaints that, we didn't hear it from you directly, you only gave us a year. So we were trying to do better this time and say, let's just go public with it, let's put it on the table, let's make sure we have plenty of time to discuss it. A couple of years seemed pretty reasonable. So that was the point there. And also, sometimes the Solid Waste Advisory Board recommendations are approved and sometimes, they're not by this body, so.
But you approached the county before it was put on the agenda here tonight, though.
In January, David and I had a discussion and said, we need to start this discussion. He said, I'm really busy with the legislature. Can we wait till February, but again, word was starting to get out as we were having internal discussions with our employees, and I just thought, we need to be upfront, let the mayors know, let the county council know, so we can start having the discussion. So, again, I don't have all the answers tonight. You know, you'll need to chart your course forward. We can have discussions, and we'll be as helpful as we can.
Well, I think we appreciate the heads up and appreciate you approaching the county, and trying to let us know.
Thank you, Mayor Daines. We appreciate the information.
Thank you
Thank you
very
so much for being here. All right, it is 5:30, so we will put the other two items back a little bit and do our public hearings. We have reset a public hearing for March 15th, and we'll talk about this in a minute because of the change of the meetings, but we were assuming that's what we'd probably do. So March 15th, 2022, Resolution 2022-3. A resolution declaring the county's interest in the real property located in Lewiston, Utah, described as the portion of tax identification parcel number 14-029-0018 that is north of 2000 South Street in Lewiston as surplus property and approving the disposition thereof.
Madam Chair, I have a question. If we approve that, resetting that public hearing, then we are meeting that day for sure.
Yes, that is true. Shall we go back and talk about okay, let's go back and talk about Section D first before we go on to that. Okay, as everyone knows, that there's going to be party caucuses on March 8th, which is our next hearing, our next meeting. So in the past, what we've done is change these meetings to the week after. For the month of March, we're looking at March 15th and 29th.
So still missing a week in between.
Correct. Everyone agreeable with that?
Do we need a motion on that one?
Yes,
Change that calendar, basically.
yes.
Then I would move that we go ahead and change that meeting date of March 3rd to March 15th for the county council.
Okay, and then March 22nd to March 29th.
Or March 8th to March 15th, sorry.
Okay. And March 22nd to March 29th.
Do we want to do that one too? Actually, that'd be good. I think that's my anniversary. That'd be good.
Okay. All right.
But I don't want that to be the reason.
Okay. So it's been moved that we change the meeting in March from March 8th to March 15th and from March 22nd to March 29th. Do I have a second on the motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we change our March council meetings from March 8th to March 15th and March 22nd to March 29th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Then I would go ahead on to reset public hearing, Resolution 2022-03. And can I go ahead and do Ordinance 2022-12 and move those to March 15th, 2022?
Yeah.
Get it both done right now.
Okay. We have a motion to reset public hearings and set a public hearing for Resolution 2022-03, reset, and set a public hearing for Ordinance 2022-12, the Cutler Valley rezone, to March 15th. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we reset the public hearing for March 15th for Resolution 2022-03 and set a public hearing for Ordinance 2022-12, Cutler Valley rezone. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. All right, we have a public hearing, Resolution 2022-04, There's no resolution until the next meeting, but we do have 2 applicants that are applying for the Cashwater District Board of Trustees. And I understand one is here. Is the other here? Is Regan? Yes. Okay, you're here. Would you like to come up and address us on this? All right. State your name and,
Over here.
oh, please, over there, yes. Please use the mic.
Just act like you're in church and you'll be fine.
Yeah. My name is Regan Wheeler. I live in Lewiston, Utah. I've lived there my entire life. I've been in agriculture my entire life. I have retired from agriculture now on a daily operation, but I also still own farmland in the Lewiston area. My bulk of experience for this job would be the fact that I was manager of Cover Irrigation Company for 40 years. And so I've been acquainted with water rights, usage, delivery of water, along with my farming operation. And I also attended Utah State University with a degree in Ag Econ in 1974 and raised my family in the Lewiston area. That's kind of my story tonight. If there are any questions, I'd address them.
Any questions for Mr. Wheeler? Doesn't look like we have any questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Regan, we appreciate it. All right, the other applicant is Grant White. Is Grant here? Very good. If you'll come on up, Mr. White. Appreciate you being here, and if you'll state your name. Tell us about yourself.
You might not want to know it all.
Oh.
My name's Grant White. I also have been born and raised in Cache County, lived in the southern end of the valley. And I think I can answer my qualifications with one answer. I don't think there is anyone out there, farmer, rancher, private citizen, that understands the importance of water quality, water quantity, and the protection of water rights more than a trout farmer. And I am a trout farmer.
Right. Any questions for Mr. White? All right, Mr. White, thank you very much for being here. All right. So as I said, the resolution will not be until the March 15th meeting on this. So we close the public hearing. Pardon me? Yeah. Do we have public comment on this?
Move to close the public hearing?
I don't think we
Okay.
can take public comment on it.
No
do we?
public comment. Okay.
Comment on it?
Yes, I believe you ought to take
Oh,
public comment if it's
okay.
here.
All right, public comment. Anyone want to speak? Come up to the podium, give your name. All right, doesn't look like it. Very good.
Close the public hearing there.
Second?
Okay, moved and seconded that we close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, very good. Public hearing is closed. All right, let's go back to 6B and talk about the Hiram City request for extension of RAPS funded project. Craig Rasmussen and Jamie Van Huss. Thank you. And if you'll state your name while you're here.
I'm Craig Rasmussen and with Hiram City Council, and I'm glad that you had the public hearing between us and that previous conversation. I hope this is a little bit lighter and easier to address, and I hope, David, that your anniversary is on the 22nd, not on the 29th of March. I'm not sure which way that was going.
Hang on, hang on.
That would be good to
I
miss
think
it.
it's the 22nd.
I want that in the minutes.
She knows.
So,
Me, very well.
in 2019, for the RAPS application, Hiram City applied for funding for the exterior renovation of the Elite Hall. Are you all familiar with the Elite Hall building out in Hiram? Okay. And we were awarded $125,000 for that work. And the nature of the work for which we were applying is paint removal and the exterior renovation. And so the process of that, chemical paint removal, is somewhat weather dependent or climate dependent because the chemical needs to stay moist to be activated. So it doesn't work very well in the hot summer months. And so we didn't utilize that funding in 2019 because we kind of lost the window, which is the early spring, the spring season for that work. As you all know, at the beginning of 2020, what happened, everything kind of shut down for a few months. We didn't know, people were working from home, contractors didn't know what work they were going to be doing, if they could have employees working and things. And our city, Hiram City, closed their offices and canceled a lot of meetings for a while. So COVID realistically shut down 2020 for that work. And I think at that time, Ron had made a note to the council, or at least he would talked about it. I don't know if that actually got passed forward, that we were asking for an extension just because of COVID things. And I think there were a number of projects that kind of got hit by that. So the next sequence in 2021, we did bid the project out. It was at the same time period when the Salt Lake Temple renovation was just getting underway, and just about every mason in northern Utah was involved with the Salt Lake Temple renovation. And it was very difficult to even get people to bid on the project. We did have 2 companies bid that work. One was extremely high, the other was extremely low, and as we evaluated those bids, the general contractor on the low side, once he found out kind of what his subcontractor had done, it was an unexperienced subcontractor with that type of work, he respectfully asked to withdraw his bid. And that left us with working with a mason that was very involved in the temple renovation work and would have had to try to find additional people and split his crews up to come up and meet that. So it was a very expensive work to proceed that way. We had decided not to award the bid at that time just because of the budgetary requirements. That was upwards of almost $800,000. It did include more than just the paint removal. It included more repointing of the brick, a lot of crack repair work and things of that nature.
And also a lot of waterproofing and graffiti. I mean, it was like complete,
Yeah.
Five-star
It would have been a
restoration.
high-end restoration work, exactly, yeah. This year, and also again, the timing of that, the springtime is the best time to approach that chemical paint removal. We talked with the experienced contractor last year when the bids came in very, very high and asked him, are there things that we can do to adjust this? And he said, let's look at next year. He says the temple will be finished. A lot of these other large projects in Salt Lake area will be finished. Let's revisit this in the fall. So last November, we reached back out to him and he says, yeah, this is looking better. Again, we were a little bit concerned with the budget, so we looked at downsizing some of that work, of not including the consolidant and some of which is a special type of sealant, and cutting back on to just more of the essential brick repair work, and with areas where the brick are severely damaged as opposed to just some of the crack repair. We had a quote from the contractor of $344,000 for that work, and an additional $30,000 retained for just some of the brick repair as a kind of a time and materials expense basis as needed there. So about $375,000 to do this work. And so we would propose and would like the county's approval to continue to keep that 2019 RAPS funding, to continue to apply it to that same project of the exterior renovation. And the city has, City Council in Hiram has voted to, again, submit an application for RAPS funding this year to supplement that to help can cover some more of that additional cost. And the city is also talked about what, the city will contribute to extend the leverage, I guess, the work on the Elite Hall to get as much of that moving forward as possible. And so I had conversations with the contractor this week, and he emailed about that, and he can start that work in May. And so we're pretty confident that it will move forward this year. And we are all very excited to see those improvements to the Elite Hall start to bring it back. Was it last weekend or two weeks ago?
Not this, yeah.
Not this past
Not
weekend,
like
but the
2 days
a week
ago,
and a
but
half
last
ago.
weekend.
A week and a half ago, we had the Jazz Nights at the Elite Hall. You might have seen advertisements with that. It's a 3-evening event. Very well attended. It was wonderful to get back to that after canceling it for a year with COVID.
Basketball, do you?
Don't need basketball. Sorry, not the jazz, not that jazz. Music jazz, the one you want to bring your wife to.
Hey, Craig, what was the original ask in 2019? Do you remember what that was?
Our original ask
You should
was
know
for
that.
$300,000.
Okay.
Because that's what, the hard thing about, so we've been working with a contractor and we had a rough idea of what it would cost. So that's why we asked for the 300 and we were awarded the 125. So, and that was part of what kind of, yeah, it was just like everything just went wrong because it was a less amount. So then we actually had the contractor bid out maybe doing like half of it, like certain walls at a time. Obviously, if you go in and just do the whole thing at once, that's going to cut your cost dramatically. Because of the type of brick it is, it's really soft, so they have to do a chemical. They can't do a sandblast or anything, and so then you have disposal and all those sorts of issues, right? And so where we got less than what we needed to just do the whole thing, we started looking at some additional funding from the city, and we were working on some donors. And so the pandemic not only stopped production, but it also, if you go back and remember what early 2019 was like, no one knew what was going to happen. Donors got really pulled back for just a minute. People were losing jobs and not feeding their families. And so, we felt it was ethically appropriate to kind of hold off and kind of wait and see how things were going to lay out a little bit. And then of course we all know that construction costs just skyrocketed. And so that's why, so then when they came back after the pandemic with the $700,000, almost $800,000 estimate, that's when we had to really regroup and try to decide, what we wanted to do. And so it has taken a year between the city council and working with this.
Historic preservation.
The historic, we're very, because it's on the National Register, so we work very closely with State Historic Preservation, and we get grants through them also that help match. They're super excited and supportive of this project. The community is, Craig was bringing up Jazz Nights. There was over 300 people there all 3 nights. Full range from my 16-year-old daughter went on her first date to people, I talked to a couple in their 80s who went on their first dance at the Elite Hall, people from all over the valley. And so, it really is like, if you build it, they will come. It really truly is an investment in our community, and it brings people there. I talked to people that had driven up from Layton, and so it brings tourism into our valley too. So it really is a worthwhile project both for our community and for the county for tourism. And so, being able to extend this funding, like Craig said, we just got the email back today that said we can, if we can get a for sure from the city, he's like, I can put you on the schedule this spring for sure. We can get going on the exterior restoration. And then, the city is willing to, there's, things, even little things like the power needs to be moved in order to get around the building. The front awning needs to come off, and there's some door work, window work, things like that. So the city is fully supportive of putting in money to make sure that by the time we're done, we have a really beautiful preserved hall. And once the outside looks great, it just makes me so excited. It will be able to, continue to move, because structurally it's great. It functions really well. Once we get the outside, there'll be some, also the city will need to do just a little bit of roof and drainage repair, because that's part of what's caused the problem, especially on the north wall, is inadequate water drainage. And so all of that will be addressed at this point. And then, so once we get to this point, it will just be aesthetics.
Okay.
you know, to get it really, kind of take 1970 off the inside of the building. And then once we get that, it will just, you know, it will look as gorgeous as this room, so, yeah.
Councilman Erickson.
Madam Chair, I think to be consistent with other requests such as this, I would therefore move that we go ahead and extend them the one more year, is what you're wanting, the 1 more year extension on that RAPS request. So,
And I would absolutely second that. I mean, what they said, you know, COVID was a crazy thing, messed us up, and the Salt Lake Temple is, I'm working with a few folks, that's the biggest masonry project in the world right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's soaked up almost all the capacity in the state, so, absolutely.
Okay, very good. It's,
Chair, I'd like to
oh,
ask another
yes.
question. How much money is Hiram City committed to put into the project?
We had a discussion about that at our last council meeting and came up with a whole list of different items that, that amount came up to about 80 to 90,000. And then they have committed to, you know, whatever RAPS money doesn't cover, to, you know, covering the rest of that as well. We hope that with this year's application, we can cover a significant amount of that. But the short of it is, do you all know Stephanie Fricky, our city recorder? She looks right out her window at this Elite Hall, and she wants to see it cleaned up. So the short of it is, we hope this project goes forward.
One thing that you would probably help the RAPS committee is if you would prioritize that as your #1 thing. Don't list 5 projects that you want.
Absolutely.
Make us
Yep.
decide which one you want funded. You,
Yeah,
if
no,
you want-
this is the one project
Yeah,
Hiram
and
City is
that's
gonna
what
be.
the city council
Yeah,
was
if you-
discussing.
are dead
I
set
have the
that you
application
want.
right here. I'm almost ready to submit it this week.
So it's about due, and don't you dare come
don't
here
you
and say
dare
you.
don't you dare be late. We do
You
not
missed
like
your-
I've done that
And
once.
you missed your opportunity, because there's always someone here that's crying, and,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
and you know, we don't like to be hard people, but you gotta be fair, and, you
It's
know.
almost, it is almost ready to go. Craig and Ron's gotta look at it and we'll have it to you.
I know we always watch out for every city in the county and try to help them with their requests. But sometimes you get cities that's got 15 requests, and they want us to know which one they want, and then when we don't fund one, they wanna know why. So if you'll be like that and just say, this is our Hiram request, I'm sure you'll get some money. I don't guarantee ever how
understand that.
much.
Yeah. And that's what, you know, we've got a councilman and our mayor here, and they specifically talked about it. And as museum director, gave me permission to write this grant, and this is the one request Hiram City's putting in for the year.
Okay,
And I
very
might
good.
add, we were really appreciative of how far up in the parade we got last year.
Remember that.
All right. Thank you, Craig and Jamie. We appreciate your help. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we give the request for extension of RAPS-funded project for Hiram City. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, let's go on to 10A, pending action. And looks like we have a number of those, right? Okay,
through F, can you
A through F, that
all of
is
them?
correct. Is that all of them, John, or,
It is.
all right?
I can address them if you want me to, or if you're ready to act on them, you can.
Council, do you want him to address it, or are we ready to act upon them? Do we need a refresher of what everything is?
I looked at them all.
I think it would have been good to put that on the agenda, because it's hard to keep all of these straight, because there's so many of them.
Can you give us a short update on each one, John? Thank you.
I'm straight in the back.
See if it remembers from last time.
For the $50 an hour lawyer cost version.
Ordinance 2022-05. This is to update in the county code, the location of city, or of county council meetings to be this address rather than 120 North, 100 West. It also makes part of the code that the regular meetings in December would be on the first and second Tuesday of the month, which is different than the other months. And then it changes the order of a regular meeting from being call to order and then invocation to call to order to opening remarks.
Okay.
Those all just reflect what's being done so that the code reflects current practice.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I make a motion that we approve that ordinance?
Okay, second, it's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance 2022-05, amending section 2.12.200 of the Cache County Code to update and correct the meeting place of the county council. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, John?
Ordinance 2022-6 also is, this one is just updating references to state code. Our county code and state code together have requirements for surplusing personal property, that if we've got an old desk or whatever in the county, it's got to go through a surplus process. This part of our county code exempts from that process items of unclaimed property, items seized by law enforcement, lost items, where there's another set of state code that says here's what you do when a county gets property in a criminal investigation or finds lost property. And the references to state code for those were outdated, and this updates those references.
Okay, very good.
Question.
Yes.
You mentioned that property obtained by law enforcement was excluded, but yet we have that crossed out in the red line. Is that supposed to remain in there? Property
So,
obtained by the county attorneys or county sheriffs?
Yeah, that's a good question. Property, what the code as written says property obtained by the Cache County Sheriff's Office in accordance with, and then it lists some sections of state code. Not all of the property that might get disposed of in those sections, under those sections of state code, would necessarily come into the county through the sheriff's office. So we just took out that reference to the sheriff's office, but then like would be disposed of in accordance with the Forfeiture and Disposition of Property Act. That's property that's going to come in through the sheriff's office. So yeah, we've just thought through that to make sure that that our code doesn't assume that all of this property comes in through the sheriff's office. It doesn't all come in through the sheriff's office. Did that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Can we just go through all these, John, and then do a final?
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Ordinance 2022-07 is somewhat similar. It's just making a update to the reference to state code with regard to the disposal of surplus real property. That's all that does, is change the Utah code section that's referenced. Ordinance 2022-08 also, this is in the section defining emergency or disaster in the county code, and we use the definition in state code for emergency or disaster, and we point to the sections of state code. Those were again outdated, and we're updating those references.
Okay.
2022-09, lawful fence defined and legal fence defined. Again, these are updating references to the state code, and then in that section 15.24.010 of the county code, subsection B, territorial restriction for operation of this section, all of that is just so obsolete that that section just is no longer needed. And our recommendation will be that these sections be revisited before too long to make substantive changes as well, just because the definitions of lawful fence and legal fence are likely themselves outdated. Ordinance 2022-10 is again just an updated reference to the correct section of the current section of Utah code. Those are all of the changes.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I think all those updates and clarifications are all warranted, so I therefore move that we approve ordinance 2022-06, 07, 08, 09, and 10.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we update and approve the changes on ordinances 2022-06, -07, -08, -09, and -10. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, John. All right, very good. All right, we have some proposals for consideration of action. Okay, number 11A, ordinance 2022-11.
We don't have that one in front of you.
Okay, so
We'll get
that,
one.
okay, so that will be for next meeting, John. Thank you.
If anyone would like a sneak peek, it's on the website under the audits.
Okay. Thanks, Jess.
That's the one that got presented to the audit committee.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's not in ordinance form yet. That's what's needing to happen, is get that audit report converted into ordinance form and put in front of you.
Okay, thank you. All right, resolution 2022-05. A resolution amending the Cache County Corporation Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual regarding traveling on county business. Amy, would you like to address that for us?
Good evening, Council.
Hello.
This portion of the Personnel Policy and Procedure Manual, as you can see, has been rewritten, just about the whole thing. It really has a lot of red marks on it. As we were looking at the per diem amounts that were allowed for Cache County employees, it hadn't been revised for nearly 20 years. And so the Ordinance and Review Policy Committee, I just messed up that whole name. That committee has looked at this, not only just the per diem amounts, but also the language for the traveling, and made suggestions and recommendations, and it's gone through the committee for many months and many revisions. So I'm hoping that you've had a chance to read through that, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to address those.
Any questions? Okay.
I have something that I didn't notice before when we were looking at this on the committee. I'm not sure the page number, but it's under lodging allowance. And it includes lodging expenses for employees or county representatives traveling on approved county business. But there's no definition anywhere of what that county, who qualifies as a county representative, or how that's determined. And that, I think that there should be something to determine that, to make sure that everything's on the up and up. And do you remember putting, I didn't see anything, Amy, do you remember putting anything in there as a definition of that term?
No, it's never been in the policy for as long as the policy has been around. Just at the top, it talks about an employee, officer or representative of the county. It doesn't define any of those.
And you said that's been in there this whole time? That's funny. Somehow it stuck out, maybe because everything else was crossed out around it and it was
Probably.
there, I don't know. But I'd like to see that defined, just to make sure that there's no misunderstandings or no problems.
So will we be putting this off then, Councilwoman?
It would be appropriate to put it off for at least one meeting anyway.
Okay.
It's for initial consideration and ought not to be voted on.
Basically, just to define that one thing, so.
Either strike it or define it would be my motion.
Okay, so we're looking at bringing this up on the March 15th meeting. Okay, great. Thank you, Amy. Appreciate your help. Thank you so much.
Thanks for all your work on that, Amy. That was a lot of redlining.
All right. Request for approval, enforcement officer position reclassification. Chris, want to address that, please?
I don't know why Dave's laughing at me, but it's not a good indicator. I don't know what that means. I can put it on the screen here if you'd like, but if you have it, I won't.
We have
Preference? Okay. So this is one that's been, I think, a long time coming. So I remember when I was working with Josh Runhar, who was my predecessor, he and I would have discussions about if we needed an enforcement officer. And he tasked me to do the enforcement work, and I was saying yes, and he was like, I think we're okay. And so my perspective has always been that we need someone to do it because I've been involved with it. And I still feel that same way, and I've heard comments from multiple council members and different folks that we need an enforcement officer. We have a part-time officer approved presently. And my request tonight, is to reclassify that position from a part-time position to a full-time position. And I've detailed some of those reasons in here with the memo I provided. One of them being just following up with all the permits we issue. So there's about 2,000 conditional use permits we have on the record we need to go through, vet. We've cut that down from a larger number to the ones we know that are actually needing to be reviewed. And we have new conditional use permits come out every year, and there's not a great tool for us to follow up with those unless it's me. And as you can imagine, I have other things that I get pulled into that don't involve enforcement. So the things that rise to my plate have to be a pretty high level, and I can spend the time to investigate and follow up on those pieces. So there's a definite need for enforcement. And one of the things I want to point to with that I think is pretty critical, if we're adopting pieces of code and not enforcing them, the level of frustration for the citizens and for staff and for you starts to really grow. And we're at that point where it's kind of past the point of needing a solution. And so I would highly encourage your consideration for that position to transition from a part-time to a full-time position. Something that's going to accompany this, and that's what stalled at the initial time, is we were trying to put the code amendment first and then to hire someone in to fill that position. We went through some motions to try to make that happen that didn't work out. And so we're trying to refocus our attention to maybe a smaller scope, get those pieces in place, get a person hired, amend the code, and then look at trying to expand that influence. I shouldn't say influence, but that need to accommodate more things than just the land use piece and building inspection. So we're trying to widen our approach, but know that we need to have a smaller step first. But I think a full-time position brings a lot of benefits that a part-time position will not. And so that's staff's recommendation. My recommendation as a director that we need that. And I agree with the comments we've received from council that there's an absolute need for that.
Do we have a way in our ordinance code or whatever that there's bite with this enforcement officer? I mean, if we go out and citation, but there's never, call it a sting to it, a fee or anything, John, can you give us any guidance on that?
I can talk you through
Chris can too.
current
I'll
process.
fill in after Chris maybe.
Sure. Our current process that we'd like to amend gives us two options. One is a civil penalty, the other is criminal. Our current tool right now is emphasis on the civil, and I think that's what we'd emphasize again as we amend the code. But right now our process is if someone breaks the law, essentially the land use code requirements, then I typically try to call them because sometimes there's just there's a lack of understanding, and we're not trying to be a heavy hand. The second step is we send them an initial notice of violation. It's a letter that comes from my office. It's kind of not a pleasant letter to get. I try to avoid sending that letter because you get phone calls when I send that letter, really. If they don't respond to that, then I send another letter that's a final notice of action or of enforcement, and I don't send that really. I give it to the sheriff's office through the civil division, and they serve a letter to that person. So then it becomes very apparent to them that there's an issue. If they've missed the phone call and they've missed the other letter, it becomes very apparent when the sheriff shows up and says, you need to do this. If they don't respond in 10 days, then we start to fine them $100 per day. So the important part of all this is if we set those fines up, and I go through all that process and get to the point where I'm now issuing fines, you can tell I've already spent probably a good month to 2 months working with that person to try to get them to comply without success. So now I'm issuing a fine. What's been a challenge in the past is we'll go to collect that fine, and guess who they call? they call the council, and they call the executive. And guess what the result has been in the past? And I'm not throwing you under the bus, maybe a little bit. We get backed off as staff to not do anything. And that is terribly detrimental to our work and terribly detrimental to the county. So when we talk about having bite, I'm all for it because it's necessary, but we need it more immediately than that long drawn-out process. So when we talk about amending the code, there's very much a need to have that initial sting happen sooner than 2 months after we've identified the violation. It's like when you get a parking ticket, or if you get a speeding ticket, there's an immediate consequence to what that action is, hopefully not delayed. But what we'll work on is trying to figure that out with the attorney's office. We've got some ideas with our previous counsel when Lee Edwards was here. We've talked through some ideas, and we've talked through some ideas with John. We'll continue to have that discussion, but absolutely there needs to be bite, and I think it needs to be on the civil end. We've been through the criminal process. It's not a good tool for land use violations. The courts don't like to see it. I feel like it's a waste of their time for the most part. It's usually not egregious enough to take to them. The last one we took through there, they were cited for a Class C misdemeanor. They were given a $200 fine, and they're still doing what they're doing. It's not a good tool. So if we can start doing the fines, what might be an idea is, this isn't built, so I don't usually like to build a case based on hypotheticals, but the preference is that we fine them, they have to pay the fine. If they can't, they have to go to small claims court. We settle that out, and if it continues, we do the same thing again. That's more of a sting and a bite than some of these others that we've been sitting on, and there's probably 50 grand in fines, second round. So overall, we're probably closing in on 90 to 100 grand in fines on specific enforcement issues. And we have to act on those more actively. So long answer to a short question. I apologize. But there's absolutely a need, and I feel there's some bite there, but it's just so delayed.
John, did you have anything to add to that?
Just that once the fines are imposed, we need to, in the attorney's office, then take more swift action. If the fines aren't paid, the fines are imposed, but they aren't paid, then take the next legal action as well. And it'll be curious to see how many times we need to do that if there's a full-time enforcement officer, how much work that will be generating for the attorney's office as well. So you may be hearing from me about that as we go along.
Can we exempt the derelicts that don't pay their $40 for their water heater fine?
It's $50. It sounds like you're $10 short.
It's getting worse the longer I'm here.
The other important role of this enforcement officer is education. So don't just think about them as this heavy hand and having the sting and the bite. But there's a very strong and important need of educating just the citizens. Again, a lot of this is just ignorance. It's not intentional, it's just what it is. And it's very helpful to have someone that knows what's happening, what the requirements are, and can talk someone through what the process is. We do have people that will abuse that system, and it's apparent, but we'll build the tools in to kind of account for that and correct that.
Well, I think that person should be at your planning and zoning meetings all the time because they hear from residents who are near some of these situations and they hear the input, and it helps on that stuff too, because we're basically asking now residents to police their neighbors, and that's a tough situation.
It is. I had one today that came in. They don't want to give their name. They want to stay anonymous, and I understand that, but this one was a misunderstanding. They thought something was happening on the property. It took a phone call, and I was able to clarify what was going on. Some of those are very simple things to check. Some of them take a long time to investigate and confirm and follow up on. It just depends. But yes, I agree.
Part-time, is that something for somebody that could go full-time, or is that somebody that's already staff in the office?
Say that again. I don't know if I followed your question.
The person that's part-time right now, right?
We have a position that has not been filled. That's
so nothing's been there.
Because we waited to fill it until the code would be updated, and the code, that approach did not work. And so we're revisiting that.
Do you see this position being something that's only under the development services, or are there other entities, areas that would be in this?
That was our initial question about a year ago, and we've had some discussions with the sheriff's office. We feel like there's some shared interest in what that might be. but we're not, and the sheriff's here, he can probably give some comment on that too.
That would be interesting as to how that would overlap. I mean,
My
if it
interest,
could.
my interest is, that sounds like a hell of a poor job to try to be it.
I feel like we need
The only job that you get is go out and tell somebody that you're in
No,
trouble.
there's two sides to this. You know, enforcement, you're kind of painting this person as someone that's just gonna go out there and just find the bad.
Yeah.
But in reality, what he just mentioned, there was a phone call that was made, and then we found the good.
Yep.
And so it's, you know, there's probably a 50-50 blend in all that. But yeah, you're right, that there's gonna be those times or two.
Anytime you get doing enforcement, nobody wants to raise their hand. That's just the way it is.
So, I moved to a point going.
Now you know I would not touch that job in a million years.
We'll have to do a thorough vetting process there. We want some enforcement background. It helps to have someone that doesn't rise to the occasion and this has maybe not a short fuse, but an ability to reason and to understand and to talk. Makes a big difference. Most of this stuff shouldn't be a big deal, but a lot of times when you talk about someone's property, it is a big deal. There's personal connections and there's real connections to that, and we have to be aware of it and understand it and respond in like manner, in a kind manner. So I really think there's a value. I think there's a need. So far as a broader scope, I think that's also really a possibility. I'm recommending this as a starting point because we've delayed and we've delayed. So we're hoping we can just move it forward, and then we can have more discussions like with the sheriff and some of the discussions we've had before about how this might tie into animal control, how this might tie into some of the typical stuff they see when they work with these other cities that need assistance. And we're kind of in a facilitating role to help that happen, so it's good to see where we can assist.
Very good. Okay. Anything else from the council?
Trying to think where we're at with this. Are we looking for a motion to approve that? Where are we at with this as far as to proceed this?
Don't we need it in our budget opening?
I was gonna say, we'll probably need to look at budget and what this is going to pay, or, you know, if it's included in your budget now, or what's your thoughts on that?
I threw a little kind of a heads up on it. It's on the second page of that initial.
Didn't you say 50 to 75,000?
50 to 75,000. That's specific to benefits and payroll. Depends on qualifications, depends on who we get. So with the part-time, that's an additional cost to the part-time cost.
Sheriff Jensen, do we have a deputy that would fit into that just right?
Pardon me?
Have we got a deputy that we could move over and we got to have somebody that's had some experience.
We don't want,
The
yeah.
sheriff's lousy with people, right, Sheriff? You've never come up here, you said, we got too many
I'm
folks.
not sure if you said it was a good idea or a bad idea of that working with me or having this animal control person.
Well, I'm just,
quite got past that yet.
you know, I see this person as an animal control person, only it's a land use person, you know.
Chris and I talked about this, man, it's been several months ago, because there is some need at my office as well. We do a lot of work for the cities and some of the things. It doesn't really rise to the level you need a full-fledged deputy doing these things, but we do a lot of the work for that. And we talked once about maybe combining this, and my job was to go out and see if any of their cities had any interest in contracting for those kind of services as well. But some of them already have that kind of service in their own communities already. That's kind of what I found with that. But we would be happy to step in and help where we can. And one thing I haven't told you yet, and you guys probably don't know either, but it does need a person who can enforce the law, is not afraid to enforce the law or afraid to get their hands dirty, so to speak. But with the new retirement bill that just got passed, it got rid of that 6 month or that year waiting period. So it'd be easier to get somebody who is a retired law enforcement who just wants to stay working and do something different. So that could very much be an option for you or for both of us, or however, what your ordinance enforcement goes, or however my ordinance enforcement goes. Somewhere there will be some options available sooner than later because we can keep those guys in the workforce longer.
Okay.
You do think somebody will apply and want to do it?
Oh, yeah.
I
I got 175 of them who applied for it once, so.
You're not going to get my applications.
Throw it away. I filled one out for them.
All right, thank you, you two. So John, do we,
I've got
that on
the
as well.
recommendation there, and I've prepared budget numbers for the March opening.
okay, great.
So really, I'm looking for if your support on making that reclassification from part-time to full-time.
Okay,
And then if you're comfortable with that, that would kind of open the opportunity to consider that at the budget meeting.
okay, thank you. All right,
I'd be supportive of it, and at the same time, I want to just see how the budget figures out. So I would ask that, or I would think it would be a good idea to submit that to the budget opening, and let's see what it looks like.
I think, I'm supportive of it. We need something to help on the CUPs, and just as the more we develop, the more the interactions of neighbors and concerns go. So
Right.
if this person can be the calming and listen to both sides and then mediate that well, I think it will help in a lot of areas.
okay,
I agree.
me too. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we go ahead and approve the request for the approval of changing it from a full-time, part-time to a full-time, but we want to see how it affects the budget opening, correct?
Budget opening.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, then is this you also, Chris?
Sorry, it's me again. Yep.
Request for approval for trail operations and position reclassification.
Yes, so I'll start with the simple one first. This is another change from a part-time to a full-time position. And this has to do with what's happening with our trails program. So right now we've had a regional trail coordinator. Last year we kind of reclassified. We had someone who was identified as an intern, but all their budget was coming out of our part-time employee funding. So I'm not sure why they were called an intern. We corrected that last year, and they were identified as a part-time employee. What we're recommending right now is that assistant trail planner position be moved from a part-time to a full-time position. This allows us to better address our grant funding, or not funding, but what's the word I'm looking for? Pursuing our different grants and then being able to maintain and follow up on those grants with the different cities that we assist. So because we serve 14, 15 cities in the valley, some of those create and draw a bigger need than others. So right now we're working with Logan, North Logan actively, Richmond City, who's kind of participating, kind of not. They should be coming on board this year. I think they are. I think River Heights has shown a great deal of interest, Wellsville, Mendon, multiple cities. I'm sure I've left someone out and I apologize, Hiram, just multiple cities. And so because of that need and because there's such a great resource there, I have to restrict what my staff can do, which makes sense. I say you've got this many hours that you can spend over this much time with this many communities before you're out of time and you're out of ability. You're out of your ability to serve them. So one of the things we've looked at is making that part-time position a full-time position so they can better manage our volunteer groups that try to help these different communities. Like when we did the Hyde Park Trail was more heavy lift on volunteer management. Also with our relationship with the Forest Service, which we've spent a lot of time over the last year and a half, 2 years to rebuild and to strengthen, is really having a strong volunteer body that we really help the Forest Service to manage. Now, we recognize that that's probably mostly to the benefit of the Forest Service, but it's really to the benefit of our community. And our team has been able to make that lift and be a very valuable partner for the Forest Service. We've seen a lot of valuable things come of that with the Forest Service, with some of the private groups, our Cache Trails Alliance, with BPAC, with these different bike, hike, off-highway vehicle type, just anybody who's using a trail or involved with those recreational type activities has a benefit from that program. So having someone who's functioning part-time move to full-time is a very big assist and a very big help. The other part of this is comes more back to the root of how this program started. So right now, when you look to our regional coordinator, that person is funded through the county. They're funded through RAPS grant, and they're funded through the CMPO. CMPO and RAPS grant covers $50,000 of that program and that salary. So what I'm looking for and asking the county to consider is if this program, from when it started in 2016, if you feel that it's been, essentially I'm asking if you're feeling that it's been a good tool and a useful program, I'm asking us as a county to step into that role and hire that person as a full-time person and not just rely wholly on RAPS, community funds, and the CMPO to fund that position. So there's some associated cost with that, but the reason I ask it is when I have someone in that position and they're relying on the fact that the communities will come back every year for the same money, it puts them in a bit of a tenuous position. If they're relying on the fact that RAPS will always fund them $30,000 or the CMPO will always have $20,000 to give them, that helps to cover the cost of that position for the county, but it also makes it more difficult to find a person that will want to stay in that position in such a tenuous type of situation. So our previous regional trail coordinator was Dayton Kreitz. He was here for about 4 years, and he left for probably a multitude of reasons. One of them probably would be pay and the uncertainty of the position, and there's probably family stuff involved. I'm not going to put all those eggs in one basket. But when we have new folks come into the position, it sure makes it easier to retain them if they're in a full-time position that the county is funding. And I hope I'm being clear there. If there's questions, please let me know. I see some questioning looks. What I'm recommending is we transition some of that municipal services fund budget to assist the county regional trails coordinator position to be a full-time county position and using the additional funds to help fund additional projects and services that can come out of that department. So instead of looking for a $30,000 RAPS grant to fund the position, we take a $30,000 RAPS grant and help it apply to additional surveying needs or engineering review for these different projects that are ongoing. So it's very more project specific, and the county adopts that role of a regional trail coordinator as part of the county. So the real question for me is maybe less about the initial fund and initial cost, but it's more a question of direction. What direction are we heading as a county with this regional trail program? What's our hope? What's our intent? Are we going to let it just kind of keep going at its existing rate and have the role kind of inhibit the amount of work we can do, or do we need to expand with what the need is with the cities and with the county? That's really the question I think that's at the heart of that request.
I have a question, Chris.
What's that?
I have a question for you.
Yep.
So you mentioned some of the cities that are more active. Are those cities paying into the salary for this trails coordinator?
They do,
And
yes.
in return, what is it they get?
That's something that we've had a great question and discussion about in our internal office kind of dynamic. The cost that's associated with that, I think it's $500, and then the cities pay 20 cents per population, or 25 cents, I forget the number now that I'm standing in front of you. So for Logan, they pay more money. Smithfield pays more money. River Heights would pay less, right? Just depends on population what they put in. What we're trying to do is accommodate them to say, you put this much in, this is what you get. Right now, there is not an interlocal agreement or any sort of agreement that says how that works. So what I've encouraged my staff to do is put all those pieces together, identify how much time they spend, and make ourselves more accountable for each community. So in some cases, we may subsidize what someone's paid in to prioritize another city's project and then prioritize them the next year. So I'm asking them to be intentional about what the commitment is. So we don't go year to year to year that a community is not supported even though they're paying into the program. And the only real way to do that is have enough time with personnel or additional personnel to kind of build up that available time. Or be very intentional about when that can occur. So if we were to look at some of these programs that you guys already administer with RAPS or with COG or whatever it may be, there's some priorities that are established, And those projects get moved forward because they have probably broader regional or local importance. So short answer is, there's not currently a clear process for determining who gets what assistance.
And is the idea that we would continue with that, having those cities pay in, or we want to leave that and just have it fully funded by the county? It wasn't clear on that.
Okay, I would say that those funds would still remain and that they're used specifically for projects and services and not to fund the position.
Okay, and not to fund the position.
Correct.
Okay.
And so when we have clarity, some of that when I talk budget, and Cameron can probably tell you when we talk budget, is that a lot of that just goes into the same bucket. And then how it's divvied up is not quite cut and dried, I guess, black and white with how it happens. But if we identify that the position is fully funded and not reliant on those pieces, and then direct that it is coming out of the county's additional municipal services fund or trails fund budget, that gives us the opportunity to refocus it back on the projects and services and be more clear about where those funds are going and how they're benefiting the communities.
That makes sense. Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
Any other questions for Chris?
Just a comment, if we build it, they will come. So as we build the trails, you see that there starts these Facebook and these social media posts about good trails, which is great, but then it comes and it impacts parking at trailheads and it impacts roads and everything else. It would just, I'd like to see a way that there's something there that we're finding a path to get parking, finding a path to help in some of these areas of trails. I mean, if I go snowmobiling or four-wheeling, you just went, I had to pay a fee to go there and do that. And I'm not advocating a fee, but I am saying that when we bring people from outside of the county to participate in these trails, there's something we need to be watching here so that parking, and we're not causing a headache for those who are by those trailheads as far as residents and that go too.
I agree with that.
Going along with what Owen said, to just change it a little bit, there is not a parking lot in Logan Canyon that can accommodate the amount of snowmobilers that are there every weekend. I don't know if, I'm really not sure how you go about getting the Forest Service and the county and the state all together to maybe double every one of those parking places, because I have been approached by numerous snowmobiles, said you cannot park, you cannot accommodate anywhere near the amount of people that want to park, and so then you have them going out on 89 and parking out there, and then they get a citation that, hey, this is not a proper place to park, and then you start getting the fight back and forth as cross-country skiers do not pay a dime, you know, as far as maintaining those parking lots and that, but yet they put a vehicle in there just like the snowmobilers do. And so there's a little bit of a rub there, but we do need to entertain whoever needs to be contacted, that we do need to expand every one of those parking lots at least double. There's room there, it's just getting the permits and getting it done. And that would go along in this same story. It's trails and recreation and.
Well, you get Prairie Trailhead, you got the horse riders, the horse trailers, everything coming in, bikers, hikers. Well, we all want to use it, but we got to figure out how to preserve it and keep it nice and go along that way.
There actually are a lot of monies that are collected by these people coming in, and it's in the form of TRT taxes. It's just that we've been so limited on how we can use that. And I think if we get this legislation pushed through, that would open that up to be able to utilize a lot of that for these developments, these trailheads, or where that is actually impacted by those people that are coming here and staying overnight, you know, and we can take that money and use it for these kind of things. But I had a couple of questions. I think it's the monies that we do use for trails person there. I think that's a great use of the RAPS money. It's a wonderful use. I think that's, and I was shocked. Do you think that is instability really within that job?
I think it creates the question if we'll get it each year. The fact that I have to ask each year to get that grant, it depends a lot on who else is applying and competing for that
I know
grant.
that committee in the past, boy, that's kind of like a rubber stamp, you know, that's just a
I know
necessary thing all the way through, but
That makes me nervous.
Really?
To rely on a rubber stamp.
oh, man,
I know
thought
that's not always how it
I thought that
goes.
was like a, you know, a high priority within, I know, the RATs,
think it
because that
is.
is a, you know, that is recreation right there that's provided.
And I don't mean
100%.
to treat it as though they are dismissive or downplay it. They have prioritized that. They do prioritize
The other
that.
question I have is, you mentioned that grant analyst, you know, that you've got.
Yes.
So are you administering all of your grants separate than what the county, we hired a grant writer, grant person there that we've got?
I don't think he could keep up with what we're doing. And I don't mean that as a slight. I mean it in the sense that the amount of grants that we are going to run through there that we have to draft them. We couldn't ask someone else to draft those grants. They wouldn't know what to write, because it's very specific to what the trails stuff is. They might be able to pick that up over time, but I don't know that that's their role. So Carly meets with Alma, and they talk about that all the time, about how that grant communication is happening. So we obtain the grant, we help put all that stuff together, and he's helping to manage it on the back end, maybe with follow-up reporting. Each of these different granting agencies usually have reporting requirements, and he's following up with us, but we still do the reporting, we still do all the lift on obtaining the grant. He's there to help making sure we're checking boxes on the other finance piece.
Okay, would you be, my next question is, would you be in favor of maybe a percentage or something, a standard amount came from RAPS tax that automatically went into that coffer and that was solidified every year?
I don't think that's...
To keep that full-time? Because I think that's a great source of that money and a great use of that money.
I think it is, and I don't want to say that it's... I think it would be also helpful for it to go to projects and services, not just to the position. So for me, again, it kind of goes into the same bucket. But if the county's funding is for the position and we're going to retain that position, it's really a question for me of what is our intent with the program? If it's intended just to be consistently funded through RAPS funding, or if there's a broader idea or picture of what that's supposed to be. Because we have a transportation master plan, or excuse me.
I want to kind of, if you're going to grow government, I'd rather grow within with what we have versus, you know, expand it and just use this alternative money for new innovative things or new programs or whatever it may be. I'm one of those, if we've got the money, we can utilize it that way, and then we solidify it or whatever it may be that gets earmarked no matter what, or, you know, the first percentage goes this way or something. I think I would rather be in favor of that rather than just go increase the budget all the time. Okay. So, but you're talking, we would then go full-time with the current one that we have, just without the RAPS monies, right?
Correct.
And then creating the part-time one that we have as to basically have two full-time.
Yep, we have 1.5 right now, but the one is funded largely through other funds.
Yeah, okay.
Something that we can also consider is, as we add money to that, just keep in mind, they leverage a lot of funds into our county. So this isn't just a cost to the county. In the last year and a half, we've leveraged 1.4 million to come back into the county. So while we are looking at that cost with the employee, we're going to do more. We're going to keep bringing money in. So I look at it from a leverage standpoint also, that it lets us be more able to leverage those funds back, not just a payout on the county side. But really, you don't realize those things. There's not like a balance sheet that says this came in and this went out. Sometimes these are going to be a longer term payout. A lot of these grants are going to go for 2 or 3 years. So I have a harder time saying like for like on that, but there is a like for like.
Okay.
I can see where you're coming from.
Council, how would you like to act on this tonight?
I can see the wisdom in Councilman Arias saying that we ought to look at this through the RAPS tax, because that's a tax that is already in place. It's not raising the taxes, and there is money available. And I would be somewhat in favor of earmarking X amount of money and committing the county RAPS fund to that for that specific thing. And that's a little bit binding to other councils, but I think that's an important thing that can be used. Otherwise, he's suggesting that we just take it all out of the county budget, and of course, that means we gotta find the money. It's not budgeted in there now. And so I think it would be wise to discuss at the time of the RAPS funding among ourselves and that we do earmark that, just like the zoo has X amount. And let's just make it for trails, because it is recreation, that's what RAPS money is to be used for. And then supplement the rest from the county budget or wherever else we decide that we want to do it. But I'm sure that if you've got a position in the county and you don't know if it's going to be there next year, you're a little antsy if something better comes along.
Okay,
I would agree with that.
okay. So is that a motion, Gordy?
That'd be a motion that we go ahead and do it that way.
A second.
A second? Okay, let's see if I can word this correctly.
Word what I was thinking, okay?
I had a clarification. I apologize. There were two pieces to that. One is a transition from reclassification from a part-time to a full-time. The one you just talked about was specific to the regional coordinator position. So I just asked for clarification on that first position.
First position, go from part to a full.
Correct.
And I agree with that, and then I just talked a little bit about how we might fund it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think that'll cover our bases as we are now without
Excited if you're gonna
any
be
addition.
able
And it may not be bad to
to put in
fund
words
both.
what I was thinking.
Okay, I'm gonna try this. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve, the part-time to a full-time position for the assistant, trails operations, right, Chris?
Correct.
Okay, and it's also been moved and approved that we earmark a certain amount of RAPS funds to fund the second position, correct?
Or both,
Or both? Okay.
or both.
Would you like me to come up with some numbers
Yeah.
and some kind
Yes,
of
that
ideas?
would be, yes,
Okay.
most
That
definitely.
can be done. I think that
I
that
want
is
you
a
to know
wise
that we're
use of
not
that
even
money.
gonna consider it unless you put an application in, because you're no better than anyone else.
Oh, we do it every time. We're familiar with the process. We're appreciative.
It isn't bad that even if we have these applications for the coordinator, but it isn't bad that you put other applications in for these
We do.
other things. I know you do, but just make sure that,
Do it on time.
Making me feel like we don't. We try to be on the
You're
spot.
good.
I'm just hoping everybody that's here that wants to make an application, that they realize there is a deadline.
We're okay if they miss it. We're not okay.
you'll be in the paper again.
I'm pretty sure that Mayor Miller has got the point. She's been sitting here and understanding it all.
They're always in on time.
Yeah, they're always in on time, but.
Madam Chair, could-
Yes, thank you.
I may need clarification, but if I am clear, I don't think the motion ought to include the part about RAPS tax being used to fund it, because you'd need to take some other action, whether it's by ordinance or RAPS application later.
Okay.
Just act on the first part now.
All
I
right,
can
but
I can
you'll-
bring the other pieces of budget for your March meeting if that's helpful.
Okay, so I need to restate that. Okay, it's moved and seconded that we approve the part-time assistant trails coordinator to go to a full-time position, correct?
Correct.
And that's all we're approving at this point.
Can we,
Okay,
amend that motion to include looking into the possibility of using RAPS? Would that be appropriate?
okay. All the while, looking into the possibility of using RAPS funds to fund that position.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Thanks, Gordy.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, all in favor? Aye.
Thank
Any
you.
opposed? Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, thank you.
It's one of the things that.
All right, we have a discussion regarding the contract for a county lobbyist. John, would you like to address us on that, please?
I can do that.
Thank you. And are we looking at the contract, John? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I don't know that we need to look at anything yet, but I've
Okay.
got things to the extent we do.
Okay,
Some weeks ago, Executive Zook approached me saying that he would like to hire a lobbyist to help through the legislative session, that he had talked to Cameron in finance about where there may be budget money for that type of thing, and was told that I had a line in my budget for professional and technical, that's what it's titled, professional and technical services, and whether I'd be willing to use some of my budget money for that purpose, noting that the next budget opening would be March, and that if we waited for the budget opening, there wouldn't be a chance to get a lobbyist to assist during this legislative session. So I met with my admin team in my office to look at that budget line and talk about whether we felt like we could use some money for a lobbyist. It would be $4,500 a month, and I told David Zook, after talking with my folks, because we're aware of a number of legislative issues that ought to be addressed this session, and you know we are addressing a number of legislative issues, that would be a good use of our funds, and that there was money in that line that could cover that. So I told David Zook that I would be willing to do that for 2 months, and then he'd have an opportunity to come for a budget opening to get that into his budget. And then have since become aware that there are questions about that. As far as legal analysis, there's really 3 steps to the legal analysis as to whether it was appropriate. First is lobbying or advocating for the county at the legislature. Is that an executive function? And it certainly is. One of the interesting things about county government is that the legislative branch of government is not headed by a single elected official. There's the executive, attorney, clerk, auditor, sheriff, all of those are executive offices. I think that our own county experience demonstrates that lobbying at the legislature is an executive function and is appropriate as an executive function. You know that James Swink did plenty of that when he was county attorney. I meet with the Utah County and District Attorneys Association weekly during the legislature and address bills of concern and of interest, and we coordinate and take action. My chief deputy, Tony Baird, meets with SWAPLAC and does the same thing. I know that the sheriff meets with LELC, and in fact he heads up that effort. I know that Jess, our county clerk, has run legislation this year regarding the Grandma Act. My office has worked in coordination with Senator Wilson to run a bill on sexual exploitation of minors. And I know that Craig Butters worked down at the legislature as an executive. And that is an appropriate legislative or executive function that does not require direction from the county council to engage in it. If it did, the sheriff, the clerk, the attorney, the executive, we'd all need you to pass a resolution before we act on go down and advocate for any legislation or advocate against it. So, and if you look, and you hear me do this frequently, step out of the county context, whether it's the state context or the federal context, an executive function is to advocate on behalf of the entity that you represent. The President of the United States represents the United States to the world, whether that's direct foreign policy or otherwise, advocating on behalf of your entity is part of the executive function. So I'd be happy to field questions on that, but I am confident and have been doing some legal research that executive function includes advocating on behalf of the entity to the outside world, in this case up to the legislature. So I believe that's the first step of the analysis. Is it appropriate for, is lobbying or advocating for the county an appropriate executive function? And I would conclude and believe that a court would conclude that it is. Second question in this instance is, was there appropriate money appropriated by the council to contract? And I'll say I am new to the whole budget process. That wasn't something I was involved in before becoming county attorney. But I do have in my budget for professional services, which lobbying certainly is. And I've spoken with Cameron, and that's why he directed David Zook to come talk to me, and noted that that's where that could be in my, that to hire a lobbyist could be appropriate out of the general fund in that line of my budget. I don't believe that the budget itself includes this detail, but I believe that this last year, each of the offices was asked to provide detail underneath each line as we requested money to support, in this instance, the budget for professional and technical services in that line in my budget was $125,000. And so the question was, well, what would make up that $125,000? And I think this happened somewhere around the transition between James Swink and myself. So I don't know if James submitted this or if I submitted it, frankly, but it got submitted. That included of that $125,000, $34,800 for miscellaneous professional services and $15,000 for consulting fees. Certainly professional services, miscellaneous professional services could include a lobbyist. So I'm confident that there was appropriate money allocated by the council for that kind of service. Then the question comes, how about this specific contract? Is it appropriate? And I would note that in the state code, county executive's duties, this is what's on the screen. Each county executive shall, and there's a long list of duties, sub 13, review, negotiate, approve, and execute contracts for the county unless otherwise provided by statute. I'm not aware of a statute that prohibits lobbying contracts. This particular contract, there's language in it. Well, I guess maybe I'll address three concerns that Councilwoman Worthen raised with me earlier. One being under our county code, section 3.16.070A, that says all contracts of an executor nature, i.e. those requiring future performance or payment by the county, so future meaning past the current budget, must contain a provision to the effect that the contract and any payments thereunder are subject to and conditioned upon future legislative allocation of funds by the county council. And we do see these provisions in multi-year contracts that the county enters. And so this contract with the consulting firm has the provision you can see there, term 3, this is in the scope of work and fees and term provisions of this consulting agreement. This agreement shall be effective on February 1st, 2022, will be renewed annually. The contract can be terminated by the client at any time with 30 days notice. This is not a contract that would require the county to continue funding beyond the current budget. And so it does not fall under section 070A. And going to that same provision of the contract, where I told Executive Zook that I'd be willing to fund it out of my budget line for 2 months, and then he'd have a budget opening if the council were to not approve continued funding after the budget opening. We could then give 30 days notice. I'd fund it for those last 30 days, and then the contract could be done. The second provision of the code that was brought to my attention is this same 3.16.070, subsection C3. No contract may limit or delegate any legislative or sovereign powers of the county council, or any county officer. And this contract doesn't delegate any sovereign powers. The lobbyist is not in the contract authorized to pass county legislation, can't make a county ordinance, can't do a county resolution. Those would be legislative powers that certainly can't be delegated to a lobbyist and aren't under the contract. The lobbyist isn't authorized to bind the county otherwise under the contract, only to advocate for the county. So there's not a violation of that portion of the code. The other portion of code that was brought to my attention is 3.16.050, subsection B. No contract shall be entered or signed unless and until the budget has been amended by resolution of the county council if necessary for those expenditures. And we've already gone through that there is a line item in the budget that does specifically allow for this. So just to recap that, the legal analysis is it an executive function to lobby, or in other words, advocate for the county? Yes. Does it require the council to sign off on that? That's not been the history. That's not what the law that I've looked at tells me. Certainly, there could be wisdom in talking with the council, but there's no one council member that can speak for the council either. The council can act.
The chair can.
The chair cannot act for the council other than in procedural matters. The council on substantive matters acts as a council. And I don't believe that there's a history of passing resolutions to direct the sheriff as to what to work on at the legislature, or the attorney, or so forth.
Is there a difference between the individual elected officer lobbying for their department or span of influence and actually signing a contract for lobbying services? Is there a difference there, or are those the same thing?
So back to the state code, the executive is allowed to review, negotiate, approve, and execute contracts within the powers of the executive branch.
So to that
so
point,
the council, there are only limited contracts that the council, that need to be brought before the council to approve the contract itself. And in fact, I can't think of any off the top of my head. There needs to be a budget allocated if it's a contract to expend funds. But once there's been funding allocated for a purpose, then the executive can enter into contracts to aid the county in performing those purposes.
so how does that square number 13 that says review, negotiate, approve, and execute contracts for the county? How does that square with 2.08.3030, powers and duties of the county executive? A, carry out programs and policies established by the county council. So it appears to me that the executive is carrying out programs and policies established by the county council, that would be the legislative oversight. Or else the executive, with what you're saying, that he has the power to sign contracts, where's the limiting function of that? Or can the executive sign any contract he would like to?
He can sign contracts that fit within the language that you've got there, programs and policies established by the county council.
Okay.
And within his inherent executive powers.
What are those outside of this? What are the executive powers outside of that?
One is certainly to advocate for the county. And in terms of setting policy, when you do a budget, you're setting policy. And so when you say, here's $125,000 for professional services, 38 and a half, some change for that, we know are for miscellaneous professional services. You are setting a policy that there may be professional services that the executive determines are needed to advocate for the county, or other professional services. And that's a wise policy, by the way.
Sure.
For the council to say that there may be a need within administering the county, including advocating for it, that require professional services that we have not yet contemplated. And so here's some to cover for that. And he's well within his authority to do that.
All right.
Can I ask one clarifying question, Gordon, for you? So we do set that policy, and each department has a line for professional and technical services. The auditor, the attorney, the executive, the sheriff, every department has a line item for professional and technical services. And we also have a ordinance that talks about transfers, interdepartmental transfers. And I've been involved with budgets for a long time, talked to CPAs. So we thought that we had professional and technical services allocated to each department. Is it an appropriate use of funds for one department to go to another department, ask them to fund something out of their professional and technical services line item when they themselves have a professional and technical services line item for services that the department that's funding it are not benefiting from? Now, you can say that everything has a legal component, that's true, but what on these line items was your attorney's office going to lobby for this session?
We've run the bill through Senator Wilson.
For sexual exploitation?
That's correct.
Is that included, if you want to throw that up there, is that included in A through E? Now, I know it says included but not limited to, so you got some lawyer language in there that is a catch-all. But did this firm work on that?
My understanding is that they did.
Okay. But you didn't work with them directly through the attorney's office?
Not directly.
So your office funded this organization, but your office did not work with this organization?
Not directly.
Okay.
Okay, Gordy, go ahead.
You know, in government, there's always got to be a check and balance, and I guess the way I view this is we set the budget, and they justified the budget to us, and we approved the budget, and then the executive has, by assignment of his office, he's to administrate that budget and you know, the affairs and the things of the county. Now, I can see that there's a challenge here that the council feels that as though they went and did something and signed a contract without us knowing anything about it. I think hindsight, like we said in the thing previous, is a lot easier than foresight. And so I guess, John, in the future, if things are going to be similar like this, and there might be a question, you know, you ought to, the counsel I would give you ought to give Executive Zook, you know, the encouragement to bring it to the council before he does it, especially if he's going to sign a contract. And I think we can go along, and I mean, when I got thinking about this situation, I thought, well, his job is to further the county and to take care of the county, administer the county as to what the council wants him to do. And I would think this falls within what his office should be doing. And that's kind of what you're saying there. The only thing that's a little bit concerning is that he's got his own, he's got his own miscellaneous budget.
Professional and technical service.
And so as Rudolph, should have that been used out of his instead of yours? I don't know. But I don't think he's out of line in wanting to do this. I think maybe the procedure was a little bit cloudy, but I'm okay with it. I really am.
I'd like to say something. John, and I appreciate you looking at this. I have been really concerned about this because I think that by your own admission, he didn't have it in his budget. His professional and technical line is only $1,000, so he came to you to get emergency funding for which the county executive has no authority to do. I can't find it, maybe you can find it. In order to do something he wanted to do. Now, if you look at the contract, it originally starts January 15th. He had plenty of time if he needed for us to
The
look at
contract's
this.
effective February 1.
It does, but it initially talks about January 15th. So there was plenty of time that he could have asked the council to do a budget opening, and we can do them. We're not beholden to just doing them, every quarter. And he could have come to us and worked this out. I believe what he did violated our code because under 3.0409 on transfers, it says with the consent of the county council and upon notice to the county auditor, the county executive may authorize intradepartmental transfer over $1,000. Okay? He can do that in a department. But he was asking you for money crossing departments, whether or not you approved of it or not. It doesn't say in county code that you can, with all due respect. And then in B, it talks about at the request of the county executive or upon its own motion, the county council may transfer from one department in a fund to another department in the same fund. That is, I don't know how much more clear you can get. I believe that this clearly gives that power to the county council, and I'm really disappointed that this happened. He should have come to us, and I'll be honest in saying I feel like this was an end run around the council. Again, I'm beginning to see a pattern, and it's really frustrating to me. The other thing is, when you look at this contract, the reason that I brought up to you was about the legislative authority. I don't think anyone would ever think that we're going to say someone can make an ordinance. That's not what it is. Nobody's going to write in a contract that that's what's going to happen. But when you look at the scope of the work, these things that he has listed, transportation infrastructure, water development, housing, homelessness, revenue authority, all these kind of things in here, those are policy decisions. And that should be coming from the county council. That direction should come from us, not from him. If he's going to be doing this for the whole county, that needs to come from us. He's supposed to take that direction from us and not come up with it on his own. And when he is the point, also he's the point person on this, and I mean, I can understand the function of that. However, the Salt Lake County Council, they go through their stuff and they figure out what they agree to and don't, and so it's possible to do. I can talk to them and figure out how they do it. But we're just really left out of this. They're his decisions. He's deciding what policies and what plans he's going to push. I think that's inappropriate. I think that is usurping our legislative authority of the council. And it happens, like I've said before, death by 1,000 cuts. And you just keep cutting and you keep cutting until there's nothing left. And so as you can tell by my voice, and I get emotional because I jealously guard the legislative authority. And we're seeing in society executives taking it away, and so I jealously guard it, and I think that this contract is wrong. I think it takes away legislative authority, and I think the funding of it went around the county council. And I object to it. And I am not in favor of funding this any further, even though those guys do a great job, unless the county council is absolutely in the loop in this, written into the contract or hire Lincoln Hill themselves. That's where I stand.
I would say on a couple of points there, I don't think that this council is opposed to transportation, water development, economic development, housing and planning, or general municipal revenue. any of those things. And that, and we have spoken, Gina, that he has not, as a legal matter, he's not usurped legislative authority in this. In reading the code about transfers from funds, again, I'm coming up to speed on budgeting matters, but Cameron tells me it all came from the general fund, and that funds do have a legal meaning and colloquial meaning. The bottom line legal analysis is legally there's been nothing wrong. So why does it remain troubling? And I'd like to comment on that. I believe that it remains troubling. The reason why I feel that you are troubled is that Executive Zook is going about the duties and prerogatives of an executive in a way that's not been done before here. My sense is that there's been more collaboration and discussion between executives and council members when doing things like advocating for legislation or other initiatives. I will go on a limb and say I don't think that other executives have taken quite as many pictures of themselves and posted them on Facebook. I know that others have not tried to describe their functions as like those of a mayor, and that some of those things rub the wrong way.
Well,
And
John-
I'm not done with my statement yet, because I've been pulled into this too. It's not how it's been done, and it rubs the wrong way. And I think that, yes, if I get asked again about money on one of my lines, I'm learning too. I'll say, I think you ought to talk to the council about that. And if I'm asked, do I legally need to? I'll come to the same conclusion. I don't think so, but I still suggest it. You have legislative power. And if you want to guard it, sometimes you have to use it. In a vacuum of direction, then those of us in the executive branch can go and advocate for the council. And if you want to, not for the council, I'm sorry, for the county, that was a slip of my tongue, we can go and advocate for the county, including that people that are producing child pornography, it ought to be a first-degree felony instead of a second. And I don't need a resolution from the council to tell me that, unless you want to exercise your legislative power and say, by resolution, we do not allow our attorney, or we do it in executive session where you talk about potential litigation, we don't authorize you to advocate on pornography laws for the county. But you need to step in and set the policy. And where you haven't, those of us in the executive offices can advocate for the county as best we see fit within the fencing that you give us. One of the broad legislative powers that you have, and again, I'm going on a limb, is to set salaries of elected officials. You've also exercised that in a way that's not been done before, that rubs the wrong way.
I want to correct you on that. It actually has. If you go back 2015, 2016, there were differences between elected officials. Some of them were set to zero. So that's factually incorrect.
I stand corrected on that. I will still say that the way you exercise your powers sometimes rubs the wrong way. And I have had to answer the same question to others. Is it legal? Yeah, that's your legislative power. And I'm telling you, can David Zook hire the lobbyist under the contract that he has? Yeah, it's legal. It's rubbing the wrong way. Everybody's starting to rub each other the wrong way. I'd suggest you talk to each other more from both sides, and people quit trying to make legal issues out of political issues. I'll conclude, and I'm happy to take any more questions that you want to ask.
So let me ask you a few questions on just the separation of powers then. So the legislative body has certain powers. The executive, 2.08.030, outlines what the executive, it even is titled Powers and Duties of the County Executive. A, carry out programs and policies established by the county council. So if I heard you just then, you said, if we don't act on something, the executive can then step into the vacuum and create a program and policy when the county council does not act on something.
No, but he can do this. Let me see. I don't remember the subsection right on. Let me just look. This subsection 9, I'm not up on the screen anymore.
In what section, Cal?
This is of the Utah Code.
Section 9.
17-53-302. Subsection 9. Conduct planning studies, make recommendations to the county legislative body about all sorts of things. As long as the executive can have an agenda.
Sure.
And bring those items to the council and push for those items. He can't commit the county unless there's money for it and unless it's within the law. But he can advocate to you, and he can coordinate with outside people and have an agenda coming into office. And I don't agree with all of his agenda. I don't agree with all of President Biden's agenda. But they're executives who can come into office and act in office with an agenda as long as they act within the law. And that agenda can be to decide what is he going to study, what is he going to make recommendations about, what is he going to advocate. And again, I think it's a political issue.
That's the part I'm confused on, John. I don't see that word. I see make recommendations to this body, and that's what makes sense to me. We're the policymakers. That is so clear in code. We are the policymakers. This scope of work is county policy that we haven't set, and that's why I have a problem with it. It's great he has his own ideas, but if he wanted those guys, and he's working it for the county, he should come to us and say, you guys, what do you want in here? What, that's the problem.
And
It usurps our power.
and Councilwoman Gina, I don't disagree with the statement that he should come. Is he legally obligated to? No. That he can sign that contract, and unless you have said, we will not, no executive officer in the county is to advocate at the legislature for the bill on economic development or any economic development bills. And that happens. When I'm in a CIVLAC meeting with the other attorneys in the county and we're all voting, what position are we going to take as CIVLAC? Sometimes an attorney will say, my commission has directed me that we're not going to have our county doesn't have an opinion on this bill. Or they've directed this opinion. But until they get that direction, we're voting based on our judgment as county attorneys. That, yeah, that's not a good bill for the county. And I'm voting against it, or I'm voting for it. If I get direction from you that, you know what, Cache County is not going to take a position on that bill or is going to take this position on that bill, I'll follow you. Now you've been explicit on your policy. But I am confidently concluding as a legal matter that those in executive office may exercise their own judgment as to what to advocate for the county until you exercise your legislative power and limit that.
Okay.
So, let me ask just one more clarifying
Okay, we're going to
question.
finish this up.
So the county council had a discussion about policies and programs 2 years ago about this very issue. And we funded a chief deputy executive position so that the executive could go down and spend a little more time at the legislature, correct? We also, for lobbying efforts, pay over $50,000, or close to $50,000 a year, $46,000 a year to UAC for lobbying. I think that makes it pretty clear what our program and procedure was that we wanted to do. What concerns me here is the executive then, we're already paying for a chief deputy, so the executive can do exactly what you've described and go down and work with the legislature.
He died and wasn't available this session.
Well, understood, but we funded that.
Yeah.
Instead of a lobbyist, okay? And we have the money in the budget that we could have allocated for a lobbyist, but that was never asked for. We also have UAC that does that. That actually uses several of the people that are in this firm. So that appears to now we're spending even more money to do things that this council funded to do. And what really concerns me is that it was funded out of a line item in a budget in a department of another elected official.
And I think that sometimes the need for legislative action is illuminated through experience. And that if you want to indicate as you pass a budget, through resolution or otherwise, that that professional and technical services budgets in a department may not be used to fund general county needs of the county generally, then make it explicit.
I thought we did that with the transfers. But.
Okay.
I thought we did it with the transfers too.
Let's end this. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. I think we've had enough discussion on this. If you want to continue discussion, then I say you get with John personally or Executive Zook and discuss things that way. All right, item F, special joint meetings with the Cache County Planning Commission. Okay, we talked about last meeting, we wanted to set up meetings with the Planning Commission, Planning and Zoning, and we decided that maybe once a year was not enough, so we want to look at possibly meeting once a quarter. Is that something that we could discuss here and maybe come up with some dates or some topics that we need to discuss? Chris, would you like to input into this?
The last direction I received from the council was to reach out to the Planning Commission for their input. I've heard from most of them. They're very supportive and interested in that proposal. We don't have a list of topics.
Okay.
I'm sure we could come up with one pretty quickly. I think there's some shared interests and need for that discussion.
Did you talk about how many times a year?
Yes.
4, 2, what?
4 quarterly.
Okay, very good. Didn't you mention, Nolan, that you wanted to discuss conditional use?
Yes.
So I think that might be a topic for the first meeting is conditional use.
I know water's outside the bounds of what we deal, but that should be discussed.
We need to discuss it.
I'm
So,
going to make a recommendation given the timing of our general plan update. So we're taking that to our planning commission for a kind of a general discussion. That might be helpful also for commission member or council and commission members to discuss and understand. And that's going to relate pretty directly to some of the discussions you'll have later about other land use pieces. So maybe that's a good start point, is to work from a general plan, initial considerations. So when we start to talk implementation about what other existing zones might be needed or possible, that will have a direct impact on every other discussion you have. So maybe that's a good start. Let's if you'll take that recommendation, I'd say let's start there and move to conditional use permits in other zones and issues.
okay. Did they name a specific date or did you discuss a date?
We don't have a specific date. All we did in our discussion was to say that, and I think that's when we've chatted, Madam Chair, is specific to we might need to hold a special meeting and not tie it into a council or into a planning commission meeting.
Right.
And they were on board with that.
Okay. Very good. Then, Paul, do you want to meet with me and we can set a date and then we'll present it to the council and see if that's agreeable? Is that all right?
Sounds great.
Okay. And then what we'll do is probably come up with 4 dates
Okay.
till the end of the year and go from there. Is that all right?
That sounds great, and maybe that's something we could add into our typical agenda. We're asked at the beginning of a year if we're going to have a set agenda to kind of
Okay.
publish that, so maybe we'll add that into our commission schedule.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Does anybody have any discussion on that? Or want to, any input?
Nope, I'm just glad we're doing it.
Okay, very good, thank you. And special meeting with nonprofit executives. Paul, you were asking about that, and they are requesting a meeting with the council as well, is that correct? Okay, and again, we thought this might be a good idea to have it as a special meeting, not as a workshop or as, in the council. Is that correct, Paul? All right, so we need to come up with a date for that, and there is a letter that's been put on the agenda, what do I want to call it?
It's on the agenda.
Yeah, and there's a letter also that they sent, and so how do we want to set a date for that, Paul?
I'd ask some of the council members what they would like to do. It looks like we've got a lot of nonprofits that have had some really good coordination, and we want to make sure that we're recognizing all of them, and as a county, allocating resources that benefit the entire community and not just a subsection of it. So I think we can set that date and get everybody to the table. We've seen what some of the needs are, and I think they're very worthy and worthy of making sure that we get good coordination.
Does anybody have a specific date that they would like to set for that meeting?
Did we want to do that one as a workshop or something different?
I think we were looking at something different, weren't we? Or did you want to do a workshop?
We could maybe do a workshop. It'll probably be a little bit earlier. It's going to take probably a good couple hours.
Okay.
So if we set a date on a council meeting date, that we come in at 3?
I think so.
Okay, so we have council meeting.
It's an hour and a half.
Okay.
We can just have it here.
Is
and
that
then-
enough, an hour and a half?
Well, I think it might be a good start. Head nods from some of the nonprofits, an hour and a half, probably be good to go to at least start the discussion and make sure that we can, at least from there, identify some of the goals that would work for everybody to coordinate with. So there's probably more than one meeting, but I think that would be a great start to talk about.
Okay, our next council meeting is the 15th, or there's the 29th. Do you want a workshop on either one of those dates?
We should have 1 week. Maybe we should go the 29th, give us 1
I would say if we're gonna go ahead and do it, let's get it done. Let's go the 15th. That's still a ways off.
15th?
Yeah.
Okay, I will be out of town, so I will let Paul chair that meeting.
You sure you want to do it on the 15th, Gordon?
A wonderful experience, Paul.
It's not the word I was looking for, Gordon. Not the word I was looking for.
All right, what time?
3 o'clock?
3 o'clock. Okay, nonprofit people, March 15th, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, here in this area here. All right?
And I think we just take the opportunity to thank you for sitting through a nice
Yes.
meetings for two times in a row. And we appreciate y'all very much and would love to be able to support the needs in the community. You do a wonderful service for us, so thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your letter. Appreciate that. All right, we'll go on to other business. County Day on the Hill, that is tomorrow. We have myself, David Erickson, Gina, and David Zook going. I just need to make sure, are we to be there by 11:30, or do we need to be there earlier? Does anyone have any information?
Want to get a good parking spot, be there early.
Isn't it 11?
11,
I
okay.
thought it was 11.
Okay, I stand corrected.
And you're all registered.
Okay, all right. So if we want a good place to park, go down a little bit earlier, right?
earlier.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, thank you. Then we have the UAC Building Utah Conference, Wednesday through Friday, March 23rd through the 25th at Carbon County Event Center. I am going to that, and looks like Gina's going. And then on Tuesday through Thursday, April 26th through the 28th, the UAC Management Conference at the Ogden Eccles Conference Center, Myself, Gina, Carl, and David Erickson are going to that. Any others want to be added to those lists? All right, council member reports. Let's start. Gina, would you like to start, please?
Yes, thank you. I don't have anything, so that was easy.
Okay, good deal. Paul?
Maybe they are.
Nolan?
I don't think so. Excited to do the meeting with the county planning. I think with the master plan and everything that's coming together, it will be good to coordinate that. And I don't want to call it training, but I think meshing our ideas and helping the planning and zoning commission understand things or know things.
Me too. I need that.
I think it'd be good.
Yeah, thank you, Nolan. Gordy, do you have anything for us?
I just asked David Erickson, what is it that we're going to discuss with all the nonprofits?
Well, we got ARPA funds, I guess, is the.
Okay.
ARPA funds?
That's great, because you're going to be leading the discussion, and so you'll help us along then. Other than that, nothing really. I guess I might give a snow report. I was up to Island Park, and they got a pile of snow, just like we did here early in the season, and they haven't had a drop of snow up there since. And so suddenly, we are not over 100% of normal. We're starting to get below 100% of normal because we're not getting any storms, and so I'm getting a little more concerned. Started out with a bang, but it's not. We're not getting the snow in the mountains, and so it might be another dry year.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Gordy. David, do you have anything you'd like to report?
Well, I had one question on the financials that were provided.
Oh, yes.
Did you guys look at those first?
Yes.
Can you understand what's happening there? I don't either. I'm wondering what in the daylights is this? Anyway, I thought that was
Which,
extremely.
was there a certain, oh, you mean because they were all
There were
spread out?
No, there were several of them, the kind that they were and what they're providing, and it was just, I don't know, something I hadn't seen before.
Yeah, I haven't seen them presented that way either.
I was gonna say, well, that was cute, what is it, you know, and
Yeah.
without any explanation, and I don't think that's what we've requested in the past as far as, you know, anyway, what we were supposed to get, I guess.
Okay.
But, that, and I think we had some good discussion here earlier on, but I think it's created to me a lot more questions than answers. That's all I'll say, and We got to run.
Okay, thanks, David. All right, I don't have anything to report either, so with that, we will adjourn.